Dude, I will tell you, that plan, one-page plan, like 10 bullet points of what I wrote. After that day, it like removed all guilt, removed all fear, removed everything. And it was all in my head anyway, but that plan exists. Now I know that if something happens, I go right to this. So Pritesh, today I want to talk about something that is the opposite of what most people talk about, which is we are in this mad revolution of new technology, AI, access to data, et cetera. And we talk about growth, new features, new products, new services. You and I get pitched a new thing, every single day, you know? And so, but in a lot of ways, the fundamental business, the fundamental features, the fundamental products of things that we already have, may it be a product-centric business or a real estate agent service business, exists. The question I want to ask you is this: what do we do when things break? What do we do when things don't work? And you deal with this on the engineering side and the product development side all the time. I deal with this on the real estate agent side all the time. So my big question for you is, what do you do when things break?
It's a great question. So, in the quest of making a super app, right, which is very complex, and this industry is like, there are very few industries that are as complex from a business process standpoint as real estate. Very few. Like, I think, because most transactions are what I consider microtransactions, where, they last for a couple of seconds. Like, you withdraw money, milliseconds, right? You go to Trader Joe's, you enter Trader Joe's, you pick up a banana and you walk out Trader Joe's, like that interaction, 30 minutes. Real estate transaction, 45 days if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And your act of like picking up a banana and like getting out of Trader Joe's, like how many things can go wrong? Like you picked, you look at the banana, you don't like it, you pick the next banana, or you chose, okay, there's no good banana here, or there are no bananas, but you make a lot of decisions along the way. But by the time you hit the counter, you've decided you're going to buy the banana in most cases, right? And you change your mind, you leave it there and nobody cares, right? For us,
it is the greatest analogy ever, man.
But real estate is complicated because like things go on, change, everything can change and almost always does along the way, right? So when you're trying to build a super app, like when at least the way we think about it is we expect everything to break, right? I know it's a very weird way of thinking about it. But if you expect everything to break, then what you do is you say, okay, well, what can I prepare ahead of time? So you have a plan of launch. We executed one yesterday, this morning. So when we launch things, we have like a script that we have like spent time thinking about, and you launch it. Then you have a script to undo the launch, right? Like if we have a planned script to like, if something blows up.
Oh, just how do you roll it back?
Here are the things we're going to do. Here are the things we're going to do to undo. Most of the times, the undo is simple. Like you click a button, it's undo. Because we have a very modern infrastructure. But sometimes you've changed the data so much that you have to acknowledge that there is no going back sometimes. And you have to acknowledge that going back means that you have to back up the database and roll back the database, and you're going to have to tell everybody to stop working for like 5 minutes, whatever that is, right? There is like a spectrum of undos that can happen, but we do plan and undo, right?
Is that the pre-mortem conversation, and that's what comes out of that? That's the artifact that comes out of it.
Yeah, it's real. Like it's now, the technology is now 3.5 years into it, so we have a lot of stuff that we've built over time. So now what ends up happening is engineers working on features don't even know literally what exists already in some other place somewhere. So when they build things out, they don't know that they're going to shake the world on the other side, right? Their little test is working. We have enough infrastructure tests that will like test different things and make sure it's kind of safe. But there's this corner case scenario. I'll give you an example. We recently launched the ability to, like our ICAs, they're using real signature. Right. We recently launched an ability of the concept of an agreement. An agreement has amendments. So if you're on an older ICA, you get an amendment. If you're a new agent, you should get a new agreement, right? We had rolled out one version like 6 months ago, and we just rolled out one yesterday. And there were like these 1,000 agreements in the database that were not marked as signed because we were not using that concept. And now we are finally using it. everybody started seeing ICAs to be signed. There was nothing to be signed. So we rolled that back, and that took like 10 minutes.
Right. And sometimes it freaks people out too. Yeah.
Of course, people are like, wait, what? There's a new ICA. I'm like, no, there's no new ICA. So, but that's an example of like planning the inevitable failure of everything. Is kind of, I know it's like a weird way of thinking about it. Like, why would I plan on it failing? But it's also a good way to, in my world, or at least even my personal business, like we were putting out garbage yesterday. Like we bought a bunch of furniture, right? And recycle bins are like not enough. This is like, we bought a bed, a couch, like we bought a lot, right? It took three people to just push the cardboard out. That is folded. I'm not kidding. Push the cardboard out. 3 people. And they were going to pick it up at like after 7 a.m. And it may or may not rain. I'm thinking, wake up at 6:45 and push it out because it's going to get wet overnight. The rest of the people in the house, we don't want to wake up at 7 a.m. We pushed it out last night because I folded. It rained all night.
Oh, no.
And now, like, that's an example of, like, my thinking is, like, dude, it's going to rain. And they're like, no, you're a pessimist, right? Like, it's not going to rain. Let's push it out right now. Either way would have been fine. But I feel like my way, like, I'm just expecting everything to go against me and you plan against that. It's more likely to work out in your favor. Yeah, there's, like, you have to wake up in the morning. Or when we woke up in the morning, we would have been like, oh, it's raining. Don't push it out.
Well, I'll share something like pretty personal and vulnerable on this one, which I think will help with others. I haven't even shared this with you. You know, and you've gone through this as a founder entrepreneur. After, like, early on, after the first couple of like decent exits, you think you're cool and you make a bunch of investments, and I went to this point where I lost almost everything, and that was a pretty scary place because you're like, I just did all of this. I worked so hard and I thought I could do this. And then I lost everything, almost everything. And I was talking to my coach about it. And she said, hey, is that why you are holding back? Because you're like risk averse to losing almost everything again. I was like, well, sort of, like that's the big fear. And she goes, all right, I'll give you an idea around this. She goes, let's assume that you lost everything yesterday. Let's write that plan on what you do today. So I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean? She goes, let's just assume you lost everything. Because she goes, you're worried about losing the thing. We need to write the plan on what happens when you lose the thing. If you have that plan, then you are not going to be worried about losing the thing.
Exactly. That's so spot on.
And dude, I will tell you, so that plan, 1-page plan, like 10 bullet points of what I wrote, 1-page plan. And after that day, it like removed all guilt, removed all fear, removed everything. And it was all in my head anyway. But that plan exists. So now I know that if something happens, I go right to this. And so that allows me to know that, hey, if something breaks, that plan exists. And it feels, it may not connect with most people, but I will tell you that it changed my life and my approach for everything. Because now I know I can take more risk. I can be more brave. I can have more courage. I can build more things. I can say I want to buy the ducks. I can do all of that in this process, right? And that's exactly what you're saying, is to actually plan what happens when it does go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure you have maybe you have some examples on like real estate businesses or brokerages. If you're running one, how would you, with this thought process, and if you're like a broker owner, how would you think through this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think so. In a lot of ways, right? Take how we do it. In a lot of ways, even for us, I'll give you the example of building a referral only corp, right? So we launched this idea. We never had a referral only agent option at Real because of actually various strange structural rules, like being a part of NAR, not having board and MLS dues. And so it's not easy to do. And so I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know how it would work. I didn't know how. And so we said, all right, let's just do a pilot. Most real estate entrepreneurs, broker owners, team leaders, they think that, hey, I'm going to go invest in this lead source and I really hope it works. And then when it doesn't, they're like, oh crap, it didn't work. And then just play the blame game. Instead, what we did was we said, I don't know if this is going to work. Can we pick one state? Can we do the pilot in one state? Can we learn from that one state? What is the process in this state? So we give it a tight learning environment around it, and there's a good pilot idea. I'm a really big fan of the pilot ideas because it allows you the learning algorithm is insanely powerful. And so if there is a way for us to, I think the pilot also allows us to both test and take responsibility for what we're doing in a lot of ways. Like, it's no different than when you say, hey, I'm going to turn on a alpha group, right? You just want to see how they use it, when they use it, so we learn from it. And it forces us to take responsibility. And I think the other way is most people are like, well, I'm going to just switch CRMs from one CRM to another and I hope it works. I'm like, no, don't hope it works. Like, there's got to be, can you put 10 contacts in there and send one email and see if it actually works, as opposed to migrating your 30,000 contacts? So the first thing I would say is there a way to pilot in some way? The second thing I would say is when things break, what you did was a great example of an email going out that says, hey, you got this IC update. I think the first thing we do before you diagnose anything is to say, hey, let's just roll it back, calm the waters. Let's put the Band-Aid on so we can buy some time to diagnose what actually happened. I think a lot of times what the urgency of putting the Band-Aid on is not there, and people don't appreciate that. So like, the faster you can put the Band-Aid on so that you can go diagnose is I think it's a super functional thing. So I don't know if I'd love your comment on that. It is like when something breaks, how fast can you like put the Band-Aid so you can go think about it? Like, how do you think about that on the product side?
We think about it in 3 categories. Category 1 is like what I consider like a security category. Like, say we have like a big leak or some API is like leaking and like we think very sensitive information could be stolen. What we do is like we will go and like look at whether something is already stolen or not. Like, there's logs and stuff like that. We haven't had this incident, but like we go through the mindset of thinking through this. And then we have like a master key, like a master switch that just turns everything off. At that point, yes, everybody's going to be like, I can't log into my app. Well, that's better than me just leaking information, right? We haven't had to do that ever, right? But we have that ability to do it. Second is you then say, okay, an error happened. And then you ask yourself, can we live in this error or do we have to roll back? And that's the example of like, okay, this is just too much drama. Like, a lot of phone calls, a lot of people are going to call Sharran, like, let's just roll back. So we roll back. In some scenarios, we actually live in the error because we know that only 50 agents or 100 agents are possibly impacted by this. They might not even open the app by the time we fix it. So we say, let's live in it. And because the privilege of living in that environment is that we actually able to see what the error is in real life. Recreating that in like our own test environment is hard. That's why the error happened in the first place. So we live in it and we'll patch it, but we do make it a priority to patch it. So that's like the 2A and 2B. And then the 3 is like, it's there, but it's like impacting almost nobody. There's no reason to create disturbance in the force. Like, we know we need to fix it. We'll fix it, but there's not even a good reason for like engineers to burn midnight oil on it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a known thing. It's a known issue, and we'll just deal with it. So that's the other thing.
Most people didn't realize the Jedi reference there. I caught it. I caught it.
By the way, for what it's worth, like the new Acolyte show on Disney, it's incredible.
It's so good.
It's the first Jedi, is the first Star Wars like series that I think is just like going to kick off. It's brutal,
especially for folks like us. Like, when you map the storyline, it's so good. It's so good. I binge watched like the first 5 episodes.
Oh, you did? All right. Yeah, it's nuts. I think the 5th one was incredible.
Here's an interesting question for you. I'll talk about this we'll wrap it up from a real estate agent perspective. One of the things that people talk about often is like when things break in their business, like a piece of software breaks or a workflow breaks or a function breaks in the real estate agent service business, right? But I would very warmly like to call out a break is also a lack of skill that we're unwilling to accept. Most agents get in the business because they are winning on pure charisma. It takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to put my life on hold. I'm going to like build this investment to actually get paid. Even though I do the work today, I get paid 60 to 90 days from now. And I have to invest up front to get paid. So it's a hard business to be in. But because of the charisma and the confidence and the courage needed, we don't work on our skill a lot. And so I will tell you this, the biggest quote error break that I see in a real estate agent's business is just their lack of skill that they just don't know about. So the easiest way to fix that for me is whenever if you're an agent and you're with a group of other agents, role play like little micro moments. So I would ask you, so if we're at a conference, I'd say, hey, Pritesh, when you're talking to a client about potentially having a price adjustment for their home, how do you approach the conversation generally? And then you will say, hey, I know it's a hard conversation, but I do X, Y, Z. And then I'll say, well, I generally don't do this. I pre-frame it at the listing appointment. It's like, I generally don't do this on a call. I do it on an email, then I prep it and I do that. So now you get various ways in which people do it, and you can take the best for you. Otherwise, you just do it your way, and you don't know the best practice around that. So my big advice to folks is to learn when I was at Goldman Sachs, I don't know if I ever shared this with you. When I was at Goldman Sachs, they used these two words, which actually completely changed my life from a sales perspective. They called it verbal dexterity, like your ability to use language to create thoughts and ideas to help transfer belief to other people. And people ask me all the time, they're like, hey, how did we go from 5,000 agents to almost 20,000 agents in 18 months? And I said, everyone else is pitching features and benefits. When people get on a call with me, I don't sell features and benefits. I just break limiting beliefs. They believe that they need an office, but they never go into that office. So my conversation, everyone is like, you should come to Real because of this. I never talk about any of that. I only talk about, hey, from a human perspective, what beliefs do you have? And can I reorient them for the better version of you, right? And that's a skill that takes a while to learn without selling anything. And so, but that, I learned that at Goldman Sachs because they were like, hey, you're going in and talking to like the CEO of GE. Like you don't need to tell the CEO of GE what to do with their business, but you need to change the way they think about the world, and you're the facilitation mechanism, right? So while systems, processes, lead sources, et cetera, can break, agents don't realize the one thing that if they're not driving more performance, the thing that could be, quote, broken that they just don't know about is that they probably just need a little skill upgrade. And the skill upgrade is there in their community with the other agents, how they're talking. They just have to talk to other people and listen a little bit. And a little bit of upgrade in skill can drive insane results for them. So I may still ask the question that you asked, which is, if I walk into this listing appointment, let's assume that the things that I say are going to break. What do I need to prep to not make it break? And if I just did that, I would just have much better skill walking into the appointment.
Oh yeah. If I with no experience whatsoever, if you sent me to a listing appointment today, the first thing I would do is make a list of all the reasons and all the questions that they would ask me and I would not know the answer to, and the reason why I will not get the appointment. I would literally make a list, exhaustive list. And I would go to subreddits, I would go to, workplace. I would go to every place where agents talk about the reason they didn't get a listing appointment. I would write the question down, I'll write an answer, write a question, write an answer, and like prepare. I would rehearse in the mirror, I would talk to my wife, I would like, you ask me questions. It would be bulletproof. By the time I walk in the door, like I have done everything in my power to not get rejected. And it's possible you still get rejected. You add that question on that list again. Do it again.
It's so wild you say that because, both our listing and buyer presentation processes that we have built at Real is all based on, after every single appointment that I went on, I just wrote down every question that they asked. And I don't know if I told you this, while we were building this buyer process, maybe this can be a really great episode. While we were building this buyer process, I've gone on 103 buyer consults so far in the last 11 months, right? I have every question written down. I took every question in the doc and I uploaded into ChatGPT. And I said, summarize the 10 most important themes of the questions that were asked. So I took the 10 themes and I wrote the answers. Then I said, sequence these themes logically on how you would present this to a potential buyer who's never bought a home before, right? And then it sequenced it logically. Then I took that, I'm like, oh, most of this is right. It's hallucinating a little bit. So I rebuilt the flow. And that is the flow of our presentation because it's grounded in the data of the people that actually asked us. Now, there's no way I could call it 10 to 15 questions per appointment, 100 plus appointments. That's close to, call it a few hundred questions, right? I would not be able to see the pattern myself. But AI was able to do it like that. And that allowed us to build this insane presentation, which I would have never been able to do on my own, which is insane if you think about it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, talking about that, by the way, another topic for an episode maybe we should talk about is hallucinations on its own. I was like mind blown. I was recently fooled by ChatGPT like crazy, but we'll do it on the next episode. I'll use some example.
Yeah, so we got a couple fascinating episodes coming up. So here's Pritesh and my operator's advice to you. If things are breaking, number one, ask the question, hey, assume it's going to break anyway. What are you going to do up front? And then take the responsibility to do that. Number two is, if something breaks and you can't fix it, do a Band-Aid so you can do some diagnostic around it. But just doing those two things will dramatically help your results. So that is that episode of the Super App Podcast.